Recent research, if you'll excuse me, effects and affects on children of prisoners, risk of antisocial behaviour and or delinquency. Risk of intergenerational transmission of crime. This is really if you like, a literature review of what's out there on children of prisoners currently. Experiences of social exclusion and stigma, and poor mental health outcomes. But I want to ask the question in my research, is this consensus really quite misguided? As criminologists and sociologists, there is no universal definition of crime or antisocial behaviour. And as Waiton points out, the catch-all term antisocial behaviour has today become so widely used. It was rarely used in the media until the 1990s. And in the 1980s, a couple of articles a year were printed in the UK. In January 2004 alone, there were over 1,000 such articles. So it's going back to the politicisation of crime that occurred when, the right ideological framework came in, and now we're just sort of seeing the effects of this ideology in the wider communities. And again, he says, you know, not even the most pessimistic social critic would suggest a parallel increase in problem behaviour. But these children are being criminalised and constructed as though this is their natural pathway, if you like, in life. And academic constructions of children of prisoners are equally negative. And I like that it is very bold claims and statements by current researchers. It is very clear that criminal and antisocial parents, and again, criminal, antisocial, you know, these terms that are supposed to appear bold and true and real, tend, I like the very clear, then they tend to have criminal and antisocial children. Numerous studies have shown that when parents are delinquent, their offspring have an increased risk, it's only a risk, it's a risk, of becoming delinquent themselves. And note the dehumanisation of children in this particular quote, offspring. If you say the word children, if you look at the literal definitions of the two, if you say children, it denotes, the young of human. If you look at offspring, it includes the young of animal. So it's those constructions that have been pervasive so far. And a Home Office study implied that 65% of male children of prisoners may go on to commit crimes themselves. And I'd just like to have a look at that. The researchers actually said, treat our hypothesis with caution. But these people, these organisations, Prison Reform Trust, Barnardo's, charities, non-governmental organisations have hooked into this, you know, 2/3 figure, or 6 times more likely, or 3 times more likely. They've hooked into it, and it's regularly quoted. And then in the mainstream media, Hazel Blears, the then policing minister, suggested that children of prisoners be targeted and tracked. Children would be tracked by the authorities from the time they are in nappies to the time to their teenage years, with extra support to help nip disruptive behaviour in the bud. So it's very interesting, again, how children of prisoners have been constructed, feeding into the insecurities of and fear of crime and antisocial behaviour. The Guardian, children of prisoners not considered by 90% of local authorities. But again, trotting out the myth, they're likely to suffer mental illness and 3 times more likely to at risk of delinquent behaviour. Just under 2/3 of boys with a convicted go on. It's not a risk now. It's not may. It's go on to commit crimes themselves. So it's the media constructions that are buoyed, if you like, by academic constructions. So looking at the 65% figure, it was a prospective longitudinal study into delinquent development, which began in 1961, and the children were born before or after 1953. 411 males. 23 were male children of prisoners. And a publication in 2005, as I say, has published and said that 65% of male children of prisoners may go on to commit crimes themselves. And they, as I say, they track there. So this assertion, therefore, is based on 14.95, I don't know where the 95 comes from, but male children of prisoners involved in the study who were born in or around 1953, and it just confounds me massively. However, another study who followed delinquent boys from age 70, there was no statement of whether or not these boys had parents in prison, but Sampson and Laub make the claim that adult criminal trajectories cannot be predicted from childhood. So, you know, intergenerational transmission, it's not an absolute, but that is not to say that some children don't actually go into crime. But intergenerational transmission, there are limitations. Mediators and moderators remain unclear. Causal factors remain massively unclear. You know, is it parental imprisonment or is it pre-existing deprivations that these children experience? And, you know, we can say that of many imprisoned individuals, you know, they're predominantly from lower socioeconomic status, may have drug, alcohol, substance misuse problems, so on and so forth. And degrees of intergenerational transmission decrease when factors such as socioeconomic status, family size, how strong a family is, how close ties are to family. So when those factors are controlled for, intergenerational transmission decreases. And it's overly deterministic. I have watched David's little documentary, and I do like it when they do say, we will never be able to predict behaviour, you know, and it's contextual. If a child of a prisoner is brought up by grandparents, there's many factors that you know, impact. And I've just mentioned the study that was conducted many years ago, and environmental and situational approaches have largely missing from this kind of research. But new directions. Siegel, writing earlier this year, the 6 times more likely figure seems to have become a popular myth. Its staying power probably arises from its conformity to stereotypes about prisoners, children. And Johnston asks a very, very important question, because when most researchers look at children of prisoners and they cannot separate them from their parents' imprisonment. And so she makes the claim that perhaps those of us who are researchers, policymakers and or practitioners in this field should be asking ourselves, have we gone down the wrong road? And so I've just done a little overview, it's really quite, to me, it's really quite simple, but in unintended consequences. I would like to go into pathologising children of prisoners, but we won't have time in this arena. They're already stigmatised through membership of a devalued social group. If you want to go on a Goffman-esque pathway, you know, So that can lead to experiences of social exclusion and isolation in and of itself, without constructing children of prisoners as deviant, and without constructing them at risk of antisocial behaviour or at risk of mental health. Each equally owns its own stigmatising potential. And so viewing children of prisoners through the lens of criminality, through the lens of mental health and illness, it's not valid. It's valid in a certain context, but it just leads to further discrimination, further stigmatisation that these children have to. They already silence themselves. It's just 2 more notches. So pathologising, further stigma, experiences social exclusion, isolation, but it also maintains a process of the cyclical, stigma, exclusion, marginalisation, and if we look at Hazel Blear's, the policing minister's suggestion to have children of prisoners surveilled and tracked and targeted, and nip disruptive behaviour, it could potentially lead to children's everyday behaviour being labelled and constructed as such.